Right. Well, it's gone 6 p.m. in Sydney, Australian Eastern Summertime. Hello, my name is Andrew Petersen, and welcome to the 10th day of the COP26. And a big discussion going on about many things which we will canvass during the course of this next half hour. This presidency program for the second and final Tuesday of the COP, being the 9th of November at COP26, was dedicated to innovation for a low carbon and climate resilient world, and also the importance of climate equality, gender equality rather, in tackling the climate crisis. But in a few hours' time, we pivot to the next topic as we head into Transport Day, which is an interesting segue, given that it is now mooted that the return of Boris, not by bike, but by train. Hello, my name is Andrew Petersen, and welcome to this G'day Glasgow. Let us, as we have always done, acknowledge that we are broadcasting to you from the land of the Camaragal people, and we acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging, and particularly welcome any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders to this particular program. What I wanted to do was actually dive straight into the Good Cop outcome barometer, because as I indicated, in what is hardly a surprising move, I'm sure he wants to be, Prime Minister Johnson is returning to the Glasgow Centre by train to knock heads together and save the world. And why? Well, if we go through a quick look at the negotiations using the COP barometer, firstly, the COP president, Alok Sharma, has admitted that talks have a mountain to climb, quote unquote, with countries that are still a long way from reaching agreement on a raft of crucial issues. Reports are now coming through that yesterday, a number of countries, including China, Saudi Arabia, and it was reported Australia, are blocking efforts to deliver an ambitious agreement. Meanwhile, the draft text is also due to emerge soon. In fact, it may have done so by now. That should provide the strongest indication of just how far away these negotiators are from reaching consensus on scores of outstanding issues, as you can see from the barometer. Meanwhile, Green groups expressed great disappointment at the non-paper, which we showed you yesterday, because it made no mention of scaling back fossil fuel production. But I would add the words yet. Meanwhile, Climate Action Tracker, as a number of you may have heard, published a new analysis of the temperature pathway of commitments made at COP26, stating that they are likely to result in 2.5 degrees Celsius of warming. The International Energy Agency had put the pathway at 1.8 degrees Celsius, but the CAT has pointed out that most long-term net zero plans from nations don't actually have credible delivery plans, which the IEA had not fully factored in. But interestingly, and this doesn't seem to have been reported from what I can see, that if governments at COP26 actually delivered on everything that they've announced, including the long-term pledges and net zero goals, then temperatures will, according to CAT, only rise by 1.8 degrees Celsius. Meanwhile, in the real world, away from the negotiations, as flagged yesterday, China, India, the UK, US, and the EU are now among a cohort of 23 governments, including Australia, that have announced new plans to catalyse cleantech investment under the Mission Innovation Platform first convened at COP21 in Paris. And you'll see I have put it onto the barometer. Participating nations collectively accounted for 90% of global public investment in low carbon energy innovation that was made last year. Moving on, following a recent report from the WBCSD that revealed that less than 1% of building projects currently account for life cycle carbon impacts, an industrial deep carbonisation initiative was launched yesterday, under which nations have committed to disclose embodied carbon in major public construction projects by 2025 at the latest. This will provide a baseline for developing a 2030 reduction target for embodied carbon on the road to net zero by 2050. Governments now that have embraced it include the UK, the UAE, India, Germany, and Canada. I cannot see as yet if Australia has signed up. In related high-level climate champion news from Nigel Topping, he stated that 15 large businesses in the concrete value chain are preparing to launch the Concrete Zero Buyers Club, which will signal demand for net zero concrete to producers. And in a new commitment coordinated by the WBCSD with the Sustainable Markets Initiative, a group of 28 companies now spanning mining, manufacturing and financial sectors have pledged to grow both the demand and supply of green hydrogen. And yes, it does include Fortescue. Also, a career guidance technology firm, Skill Lab, opened its Just Skills Hub, which will support policymakers and businesses to develop and implement the skills plans needed to enable the low carbon transition in high emitting sectors in a manner that provides worker livelihood and strength to communities. This hub will apparently also provide practical information for workers. It's going to be supported in its scale, but through the European Union Joint Research Centre and the UN High-Level Champions Platform. And finally, the Global Partnership on Artificial Intelligence, which I have always thought my daughter was referring to me when she said it, now comprises 18 national governments and the EU. Today, or yesterday rather, published a report outlining how governments can support AI in delivering their net transitions. Now, before I ask our COP stars to open their videos, I thought I would show you a small glimpse into some of the images that they've been sharing across the interweb during the COP. One has heard that the coffee or the place for coffee is the Australian Pavilion. One has brought along their new car to show everyone just how sustainable they are. One clearly has aspirations to take over Australia's negotiating role at the COP. And one, well, her colleague, just wanted to rub it into Australia's face that we lost the rugby to Scotland. So without further ado, can I ask our COP stars if they would open up their videos and their audios? All right, first question to the three of you. And as I indicated to Emma and Justice, because as they came onto the call early, how's it been finding decent food at the COP? Emma, why don't you go first?
It's been a bit easier than I thought, actually. I haven't had the pleasure of getting into the blue or green zone this year, but I've been going to side events for COP, and I found that the spread of vegan and vegetarian food has been aplenty, so I haven't really had too much of an issue, which is good. Glasgow city itself was much quieter than I anticipated, wandering around at going to side events, so wasn't too many lines.
Okay, Eustace.
Well, there have certainly been pre-warnings before COP that one should make sure that one gets access to proper food here. But I must say the colleagues at the Sustainable Innovation Forum have been absolutely marvelous in providing a range of vegetarian food. And actually yesterday I attended a formal dinner there, which was for me really in a formal setting, a full vegetarian meal. And I think, you know, the mindset shift that you can bring along by serving that type of food at COP26 is really tremendous and great to see.
Okay, Jason, we know your preference for the excellent coffee on the Australian Pavilion, but what about food? Australians like their food and they like good food. So where have you found it?
Well, I've just followed Matthew's trail for the good food, so he's got a good nose to sniff it out. But I did find a good salad at the restaurant out the front of the pavilion area. It is hard to find stuff that isn't wrapped in dough.
Right. Yes. Fascinating insight into the culinary behaviour of countries as you go to these particular COPs. All right, let's get a little bit serious. And the first question, we might start with Jason. We'll work backwards. Why is this COP the right place to be talking about addressing the emissions mitigations pathway of industry, science, or industry and transport? Look, I appreciate that the obvious answer is that there is a need for emissions reduction in industry and transport, but surely stationary energy, land use and agriculture are way more important, and Matthew starts nodding at this point, and to a large extent, they get addressed by the scope 2 emissions of both sectors. So I'm being provocative. Why is it so important for those industries to be involved in the net zero ambition? Jason, firstly to you.
Well, look, my world is in the building and construction sector, so the built environment does account for a huge chunk of the embodied carbon. So I think it's really important that we showcase technologies that are available today that can help reduce embodied carbon in the built environments. The stuff that Matt's doing, there's a lot of, and Eustace and Emma, there's a lot of excellent technology out there that can make a difference today. Our delegates, our formal official delegates, should really be putting us all up as lighthouses that show that we've got the solutions available. We just need the platforms to be able to sing.
Justice, transport, big, but you're pivoting. So who cares? Why are we worried about that sector's particular emissions profile?
Well, I mean, transport is a sector in which we have most of our emissions in Scope 3. So well above 90% is in Scope 3. And we're going to address Scope 3 upstreams with products like you see behind me, which is the beautiful i4, which you can buy today, which has 0-gram tailpipe emissions. But at BMW, really concerned about thinking further and trying to also understand what does this electrification mean for our Scope 3 upstream emissions in the supply chain. And that is a big deal more difficult. And what we brought to the Sustainable Innovation Forum this year is our Vision I Circular, a car that is 100% recycled and 100% recyclable, with which we hope to tremendously bring these Scope 3 upstream emissions down in the long run up to 2050. But it's a big, big challenge. It's something that we can't do on our own. We, of course, send the signals by setting ourselves targets for Scope 3 upstream. We're working with our suppliers, but we most certainly also have to look in new models of collaborations vertically and horizontally in order to make sure that we get either very, very low carbon primary materials that have factored in all the complexities you have around raw material extraction and processing, or we really build up stronger models in closing the loops for materials and using more recycled materials in our cars, another lever that we can use to really bring down these Scope 3 upstream emissions so that we get under control these 90% plus of our CO2 emissions, which are not happening in our plants, but when our cars are used or in our supply chain.
Mm. So Emma, you've just heard from Jason and Eustace, and we're talking two different sectors. What's your take on the provocative question that I propose to all of you, except for Matthew?
I guess I bring a third sector to the mix. So I primarily work in the water sector within the UK. So quite different to transport, but in a way overlaps with infrastructure. But what I've come to appreciate very quickly is that all these sectors are interconnected. It's not just a transport problem. It's a problem that goes across sector, it goes across boundaries. So if we're thinking about transport, it's just not the need. It's not just the need to look at electric vehicles or hydrogen or other technologies. It's also the infrastructure that's required to support these new technologies as well. And that, yeah, so it's I guess it's quite a complex, or what we term a wicked problem, isn't it, that we've got to work towards. So it's something that I think collaboration and learning through doing. We're in an environment now where we don't really have time on our side necessarily. We've got to be confident, I guess, to take some risks that we haven't before and work together, learn together. So I guess from my perspective in the water industry or water sector, that's something that we're trying to learn to do better and trying to encourage clients to do better.
So let me pick up on that and go back through Emma, through to Justus, Jason, and then we'll bring in Matthew. And the question I have following from that is, so how important do you feel the issue of, in your case, or the sector and its response, water, then transport, then industry, how have you seen it manifest in these particular negotiations, not the negotiations, sorry, in this COP at the moment? Are people talking about it? Water has never been a high-level topic in COP before, neither is nature. Circular economy is being talked about now as well. So, but give us all a sense of how it's being talked about. Is it side events? Is it actually parties to the COP that are interested in coming to these side events to hear what's going on? Give us as the audience a sense of how the importance of sectoral emission reduction in these particular areas is actually being taken into account at the COP. Firstly to Emma, then to Justus, then to Jason, and then we'll go to Matthew.
That's a big question, Andrew.
I know. It's a big program.
It is a big program. So from my perspective, from the events I've had the pleasure of attending, they haven't been drawing people from within one or two sectors. It's been cross-sector.
Right. Okay. That's good.
I've also noticed something that, so I'm a part of an early career professionals group within Mott MacDonald. And we've been together trying to educate ourselves and educate the wider business and empower people to start making different decisions, change the way that they do day-to-day work and think about net zero climate resilience. So something that's come out of that has been that there are already a lot of solutions out there. There is a lot of capability. People have the skills to do this. A lot of the problems really are a social science problem. And that's something that came out, another message that was echoed by a panelist that I went to on Monday, actually. So her name's Dr. Alice Hill. She's a former advisor to President Obama, and was something that she also mentioned, that a lot of these challenges are social science challenges. How can we influence people's behavior? And another part that came out of that was that the middle class, or those on the planet living considered middle class, is actually growing. So of this, over 7 billion people, I think, on the planet, getting close to 8, about 3 billion people are considered middle class, and in a way are exemplars. They're setting the standard of behavior for those who are emerging into that class as well. So how can we, I guess, together start getting these messages out, educating this middle class, essentially? How can we start changing behaviors? And from my interactions with people leading up to COP, going to events, organising their own events, they're not necessarily all from particular sectors or people who are particularly skilled or knowledgeable in this area, but they have a vested interest. I've been mingling with organisations who are made up of designers and activists, local people from around Glasgow, and there's quite an appetite for local people within their own cities to feel they have a voice to help shape the city that they live in and the environment that they live in, how they want to interact with it, how they can contribute essentially to reducing emissions as well, reusing derelict buildings, thinking about how we use our spaces, walking, cycling more, less cars. So I don't think it's, or I should say, I think COP has brought together a lot of like-minded people from across sectors and is encouraging discussion between sectors, which I think is needed.
And they are amazing events, in my humble opinion. They are amazing social events apart from anything else. Justice, BMW has been at COP for some considerable time. It's not a Johnny-come-lately. Why is it coming? What role does it consider it has to play? And what's being talked about this time as distinct from when you first came as BMW? What was it, 2008, I think you were saying? That's a long time between decarbonisation drinks, surely.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I think historically we've been engaged with COP in order to understand what the political conversation is, to, of course, express our view on, what type of regulatory frameworks are helpful for us to drive decarbonization. But we've also been there to, of course, showcase innovation and technology and show to politicians and regulators and, the wider climate community what is possible through technology and innovation. I think this year is slightly different because the sense of urgency is at a different level. We have now the Paris Climate Agreement from the amazing COP21. And the conversation now is really shifting to what measures and levers do we want to pull as a society jointly in order to achieve these targets. And I think that was what we saw coming from the blue zone last week. It's about deforestation, it's about methane, it's about understanding, what do we have to change in our industrial and societal processes in order to make that happen. It's not anymore about, we pledge this and we pledge that. It's much more about coming together now and identifying measures to achieve these targets. And I think business has a very big role to play in that, which is why we're here with a bigger delegation than we've ever been before, because we want to engage in this conversation, and we feel the focus is shifting away, and also the expectation from citizens who are our customers is shifting away from politicians who have now set the framework to companies to offer innovative solutions for people to be in line with the Paris Climate Agreement. And they're going to increasingly look onto what are companies doing in order to be in line with the Paris Climate Agreement, on transparency, on how we show what we are doing and where we are with our CO2 reduction measures. And as Emma rightly said, this is not only about bringing the right technologies to the market, which we're doing, it's also about cross-industry collaboration in ensuring that everyone in our supply chains, in our value chains, can make that transition happen, and we send the right ambitious signals towards each other, and we move forward together in order to make it happen.
Well, let's talk about ambition, because Jason, very ambitious of Wagner's to actually go to COP, and more ambitious to send you. But joke aside, bad one. The crazy brave idea that now is the moment in time for a building materials company to really showcase its technology and its business model and its approaches to what's ostensibly a fairly boring group of geeks that turn up to these things. It just happens to be 40,000 of them that turned up to this one. What's your sense of the value of COP to a company like Wagner's and the innovation that it's doing in the building area?
Well, look, Wagner set this course and train about 10 years ago when the Gillard government was talking about bringing a carbon tax into Australia. And they backed themselves hard to come up with a solution to decarbonise the concrete industry. And they've invested about $20 million in the last 10 years to do this. Now, this is despite a myriad of changing government policies in our country.
Prime Ministers.
I think, and Prime Ministers, and it's a vexed topic, isn't it? Should the Prime Minister talk about a sustainability
it's so dull,
policy?
Really. It's dull.
Yeah. So poor old Turnbull and Rutter getting smashed for commenting from the sidelines. But look, I think despite all of the complexities that various government policies put in front of us, it's the private sector and industry that are really leading the way in bringing innovation to the fore that's going to make a real difference. We talk about collaboration being the key, and it's absolutely the key to get this right. Even within industry, I mean, you think about the term co-opetition. The automotive industry wouldn't be great where it is if competitors didn't collaborate in some form or cooperate in some form, not in collusion, but sharing innovative ideas. So you can actually deliver value for all stakeholders. I think some of the frustrating parts, just in my observation, is the complexity in the discussions that you see that really create inertia in progress. People like us on this show today have solutions that are ready to make a difference, but the complexity in the policy framework really provides inertia for us to walk through. We're not all asking for money or a hand up or funding or grants. What we're really after is a bit of consistency and a platform and motivation for particularly government-funded projects to really drive and pull through new innovation, because that's where the magic is going to happen, and that's where we've got stuff that's ready to make a difference today. And earth-friendly concrete is one of them. We can deliver a 70% reduction in the embodied carbon of the next government infrastructure project. HS2 are using us at Euston Station at the moment. We can't even get it in a rail station in Queensland, but we can do it in London, So it shows the disparity in the policies and the way the governments behave. But that's my rant for today.
Good rant. Well, business goes where the investment, the enterprise, and the appetite for those innovative products is. It's as simple as that. Let's pivot to Jason's rant, Matthew, by getting you to come in and tell us what's the good dirt ahead of delegation for Business Council for Sustainable Development Australia, in and around the traps in relation to the negotiations and all things COP. Tell us what's happening.
So I think the real challenge there would be to respond to that question without lapsing into jargon like there's still positive momentum or cautiously optimistic or but negotiators are resigning themselves to a busy weekend still ahead of themselves to finalize everything. So I don't think anyone's going home.
We'll just put the recording from the last one we did. Yeah, 2 years ago.
But then maybe picking up on some of those threads of the conversation. So COP is a kaleidoscope of activity. I thought last week, as the first week, was particularly busy in terms of attendance and what was going on at the event program. It reached a new level this week in terms of people inside the blue zone and in surrounds. And you're constantly getting alerts that the COP was at capacity in terms of COVID safe attendance. And there also too, if you look at across that innovation and technology showcase theme, the number of pavilions is at an all-time high. Australia's first pavilion, I'm reliably informed, it's 1996, I think was the last time Australia had a pavilion.
Okay, right.
And I'm very pleased to report that the first industry event that was held at the pavilion, run by AgriProve and Corporate Carbon, went off it was quite a success. But then go figure, put on free booze and some food at a COP and see who turns up. So maybe no real surprise.
Every NGO
there.
Next.
Yeah. But when you look at the pavilions, 140 pavilions, so they're showcasing not only sectors, but rainforest, water actually is featuring in discussions. Circular economy is used outlined before, and so very much showcasing the innovations of technologies to where the solutions are. And then maybe the big call out too is these solutions are better. So in terms of the aspirational middle class of the planet, the 3 billion, as we decarbonize, we're actually creating a more sophisticated economy with more value upside. It actually, solving climate change will be a big boost in terms of quality of life for a large amount of people. And you see that time and time again in the innovation technology solutions coming through. So, and that's not surprising, I guess, as the climate change debate starts to mature, and especially as we get more indicators of urgency. So now for me, I think the challenge is what becomes the inclusive mainstream narrative for action. So it's difficult at this point in COP. There's so many voices trying to be heard, being heard. There's that real echo chamber factor going on, and there's potentially what could be seen as demonization of mainstream efforts and activities. But the mainstream is where the solutions need to come from, where the solutions are going to be funded, and where these solutions will actually be embedded and enabled. And so there that challenge is, how do we hear everyone's valid concerns and then bring that into an inclusive narrative that gets action, that allows major corporates to be part of that solution, that allows people working for major corporates to also feel a sense of pride in terms of taking action, because when it is raining on the ice caps in Greenland, we all need to do everything we can in our own personal spheres, in our corporate spheres, in our community spheres to work for solutions. So I think would be my sort of last day reflection in terms of where and how do we get that inclusive narrative for action.
I'd say let's pick up on that, because Matthew will get the last word out of the last question. But I'll start with Emma, and we'll go Emma, Jason, Justus, and then Matthew. And it kind of was answered by Matthew, but I want to re-emphasize the importance of asking this question, because it will be the question that you're all asked next week when you're back in the office, or you're back at home, or you're back with colleagues, or you're back with friends. Win, lose, or draw, as COPs always are, because they are both win, lose, and draw. What are you going to tell people about the success of this COP? And particularly, what are you going to say to business about what the significance of this COP was to their business? Now, it can be your own business, or it can be to your clients, or it can be to your customers. So, Emma, what are you going to tell people? What are you and Alan Hendry going to gossip about when you're not talking about how you didn't win the football? And I'm very annoyed about that. And Alan kept rubbing it in, which is really quite annoying. What are you going to say to business colleagues and clients about what the importance of COP was to them?
It's a very good question, actually.
I know, that's why I asked it.
Yeah, I think it's hard to think of one thing in particular. What I've taken from my experience with COP this year has been this appetite to collaborate. There's been more discussion about circular economy, which we've spoken about today as well. And I think it's trying to embrace those a lot better than we already are within the water sector. I think there is some of that emerging, but become more confident in doing that. Yeah, it's a hard one to just pick one thing from. But
no, that's all right. Collaborate. I like that.
Yeah, I've got a lot of value from having very different conversations with people from very different sectors and hearing their perspectives. And I think it's just trying to encourage that to continue, essentially. And I think there is a level of appetite there for it. So
that smorgasbord of conversation that goes on is extraordinary. Jason, apart from telling everybody the coffee was brilliant at the Australian Pavilion, what are you going to tell your key clients and the Wagner business more broadly about what the importance of COP was to them going forward?
Look, our objective coming to COP was somewhat selfish, and to really shine a light on our technology and to let the world know that earth-friendly concrete can be a realistic solution to the embodied carbon in the built environment. The businesses that we're starting in the UK and in Germany are getting traction and are getting attention in these markets. We have less attention and traction in the Australian market. And I think our time here, being able to network with the likes of your good selves, to really talk to the Australian delegation, the official delegates on the sidelines about what we're doing, not just in Australia, but our investments in the UK, the partnerships that we're signing in Germany and the UK, that we've got an Aussie technology that's punching above its weight on the global scale. Let's shine a light on not just ours, but also other technologies like ours that are making some real difference. Had some interesting conversations with other similar technologies, and even the CEO of the Global Cement and Concrete Association, who might see us as a potential disruptor, because we're effectively taking cement out of the supply chain. But we had really good constructive discussions about the fact that we're all part of a puzzle. No one person is going to solve it on their own. So this cooperation piece, I think, and collaboration is something that I'm really keen to bring back with me.
Justus, we've got collaboration 2.0. What's your take on what you're going to be taking back to the office, apart from BMW Vision Circular, of course, because I just wish you would bring it to Australia. Okay, I've said it. There it is. It's out there. Bring it to Australia. Sorry.
Well, it will be great in Australia because it doesn't have any paint on it, and it's quite difficult to have a car that is not painted in rain. So it might actually feel better in Australia than it would in Scotland. But that aside, I mean, I could totally sign up to collaboration. But what I would add to that is leadership, because what I see in my industry is consumers are asking for net zero technologies. The technologies are there, they are available, they're available at scale. And coming out of the pandemic, capital is available also in staggering amounts to flow into these green technologies. So there are all the right ingredients to make the change, but it's now about ensuring that change also happens at the pace that we need it. And that is about leadership and culture. And what I say to colleagues is, look, with the brand that we have, which is a globally recognized innovative premium brand, we have all the opportunity we can get to drive that change, to lead that change, and to help our business to transform, to be successful in the long term. But that is going to be, with all the ingredients being there, it's around getting this mix going at pace. And I think leadership is key for that. And I think what we've seen also from young people, not only outside of industry, but also inside of these organizations, if you look at the big corporates, in really hard to abate sectors, how young leaders have been driving that change and how they've been moving their corporations forward and taken on that leadership, that really motivates me. And I hope that I can, play a role in bringing that spirit back to our headquarters in Munich. And I think we're well on the way to make that happen. So
leadership and young leadership is probably the way I would like to phrase that one. I think that for me has been one of the standouts for this particular COP, that youth are still annoyed, but they're kind of getting their act together and starting to say, we deserve to have a seat at the table if you are expecting us to take responsibility for the next 25 and 50 years in relation to this particular challenge. Matthew, you have the last right of reply. You have done us proud at BCSD Australia, can I say? I think my job as the head of delegation is probably well and truly over, and that Matthew will be taking over the mantle into the future. Last words from you. What are you bringing back to Australia as you head back to the airport and back on a plane, back to this glorious country that is, it's not sun-drenched at the moment, it's rain-drenched, can I tell you? It's rain-drenched.
Probably, Andrew, how I'd characterize the main messaging is the race to zero, while being a fundamental environmental challenge and race. It's also an existential commercial race, and that can be characterized two ways. It's going to be a race to survive, but it's also going to be a race to thrive. So I think absolutely we are seeing a sustainability revolution. There are going to be winners and losers commercially. So acting now is going to be good for planetary interests, but also it's going to be fundamentally important for commercial interest in terms of defining success over the next decades and for the rest of the century.
Good answer. And with that, let me just jump back into the slides and put everybody, and I'll put you all over here, and reminding you all that, of those who cannot be there, that today, come but an hour's time, I think, is the commencement of day 10. It's Transport Day, and we're looking forward to further announcements coming forward from the high-level champions, and no doubt Justice will be in some way, shape or form involved on those, so we're looking forward to hearing about those. And Jason gets his day in the sun on cities, regions and built environment on Thursday, the 11th of November. Stay tuned. We'll be announcing overnight our speakers for tomorrow. We're very excited that it's a slightly different approach to the panel. We will be abandoning the boring bit at the beginning with Andrew and diving straight into a very fervent discussion with three leaders in their particular fields. And we're very excited about their willingness to accept the invitation to talk about that. So stay tuned, and by all means, don't forget to dial in. But for now, thank you so much to our speakers. Thank you so much to our audience who's hung in there well past the time that I asked for forgiveness a few days ago. And as I always say, respect the science, respect nature, and respect each other. Thank you very much for your time. My name is Andrew Petersen, and goodbye for now.